Sup, chooms? So I've got some really good news. Bryan Johnson, the eccentric centimillionaire anti-aging guru, has just revealed to us all the treatment he uses to stop his hair loss. Now, Bryan Johnson, he isn't your average Norwood Reaper fighter, no. He's someone who has spent millions of dollars of his own money to finance an anti-aging blueprint. So, he has an entire team of scientists who are working around the clock on his behalf to help Mr. Johnson unlock the secrets to longevity with the ultimate goal of eternal youth, so that he can become the God Emperor of Arrakis and be immortal, and that of course includes treatments to conquer androgenic alopecia. So, when I heard that Bryan Johnson had released a video that outlines all the details of his own specialized hair loss treatment topical to the public, I was ecstatic! After all, I've been hitting the guy pretty hard for not wanting to take oral finasteride in my recent videos. In those videos, I pointed out to him that finasteride is not only useful as a hair loss treatment, but has many of the anti-aging and longevity prolongation benefits that he is seeking in his project blueprint, and I'll link those videos below. But even if, incredible as it may seem, he hasn't watched my videos, I am still very interested in what he considers to be the state-of-the-art in treating hair loss. Who knows, maybe he's found something even better than finasteride, like the Spice Melange. After all, this is a guy who has spent millions of his own dollars hiring a team of researchers to find the most evidence-based scientific treatments for extending his life and growing his hair, which includes a unique topical hair growth formula, so what could possibly go wrong? So I grabbed out my chemistry set and promptly cleaned all of my flask and beakers. I was feeling a genuine sense of excitement building up, knowing that I was about to partake in the latest scientific breakthrough brought to you by Bryan Johnson's team of highly trained professionals. But that was how I felt before watching the video. Now that I've watched it, I kind of feel similar to the way I did on Christmas Day of 1991 when I asked for a Super Nintendo, but I got one of those Tiger handheld electronic games instead. Dad, if you're watching this video, I forgive you. What an utter disappointment this video was to me, especially as someone who looked up to Bryan Johnson. Who are these so-called scientists that Bryan Johnson has hired here? Has Dr. Trash somehow infiltrated Blueprint to sabotage the entire project? Whatever the case, maybe it's time to bring on a new science team who actually know what they're doing. Okay, time to take a deep breath, take a step back, and look at what he's recommending here. Wow, he's a lot worse off than I thought. Nah, just kidding. That's just how he's saying he would look if he had never started treatment. So, anyways, what's the number one thing on his list of hair loss treatments that he's recommending? Is it something that's clinically proven to work, like finasteride, minoxidil, or dutasteride?
First thing I do in the morning every day is I wear this red light therapy cap. It has 312 laser diodes. You put on the head, you turn it on, it's battery powered, and so I can walk about and do my morning routine without having to sit down.
Nope. He walks around wearing this red light laser baseball cap helmet thingamajig for 6 minutes every day while making his morning coffee, which probably has a similar degree of efficacy to his laser cap. So, this laser cap is one device he doesn't provide a link for in the description, and that's apparently because he actually doesn't like it and he's currently looking for a better one. So, I don't know what brand this is, but similar brands on the internet can be quite pricey, such as this one right here, which you can get for the bargain price of $1,708. Of course, if you were in the 9 zeros club like Mr. Johnson, money is obviously not an issue, but for the rest of us mortals, is there any value at all to buying something like this and wearing it for 6 minutes per day?
Studies on this are pretty good. It's not the most powerful treatment we do, but still it's part of the stack, and so all these little things add up. So every day, 6 minutes.
Mr. Johnson says in the video that it works and the studies are pretty good. Okay, that sounds promising, I guess, but is he right about that? Well, no. He isn't. Not really. I've done videos on this and the other treatments he mentions, and I'll link those videos below, but this is a good opportunity to look at these treatments again and see what the latest research actually shows. First of all, for the sake of simplicity here, let's just call it light therapy from now on. Officially, it's called low-level light therapy or low-level laser therapy, but that doesn't roll off the tongue too well, so I'm going to call it just light therapy from now on because the active ingredient in these products is light after all. So, do massless photons traveling at 186,000 miles per second do anything to stop hair loss? Well, it turns out there is some animal data showing light therapy helps with wound healing and can stimulate hair growth in animal models. So, there is at least least some theoretical basis for using light therapy for hair growth. However, the majority of human studies of light therapy have included only a very small number of subjects. Also, the methods used in these studies vary a lot. They use various different laser helmets or gimmicks like the laser hair comb. In addition, the studies often use different wavelengths and powers of laser light and different frequencies and durations of application. I actually reviewed the data on light therapy in a video I did just a few months ago, so let me just hit on the highlights, no pun intended. This article is a pretty good summary of most of the studies done on light therapy up until the year 2021. Here's a table from the article that shows some of the animal and human studies of light therapy for hair growth. Like I said, most of the early human studies included small numbers of subjects, but there have been some more recent studies that have been larger, with the largest study including 269 subjects. So, although the studies are generally positive, almost none of the studies lasted more than 26 weeks, so there isn't a lot of long-term data on light therapy. That is why the evidence-based guidelines for hair loss treatment developed in Europe state that light therapy can be used as an ancillary therapy, but there is no evidence to support whether it works longer than 6 months. As this 2021 review article concludes, quote, "The level of evidence of the studies is still low, and hence more controlled large studies are needed," unquote. There have been several studies published since 2021, but they only make things look worse for light therapy. For example, this study here from last year compared light therapy plus 5% topical minoxidil to 5% topical minoxidil without light therapy. In the study, there was a slightly greater increase in hair density after 16 weeks in the men who got minoxidil plus light therapy versus minoxidil therapy alone, but the result was not statistically significant. So, even though the authors of this study seem to be very pro-light therapy, they were forced to admit that it didn't add anything to just minoxidil alone. They say, quote, "We can conclude that although low-level light therapy is effective, it does not add any significant additional benefit over topical minoxidil treatment," unquote. This is relevant because Bryan Johnson, as we'll soon see, actually does use topical minoxidil, but it's just one study looking at combining light therapy with minoxidil. But there actually have been several studies looking at the combination, and there is actually a meta-analysis of the results of combining light therapy with topical minoxidil. It's this study right here. This meta-analysis concludes that while there are some studies that show an additional benefit to light therapy when used with minoxidil, the benefits go away over time. Specifically, after 6 months, there is no additional benefit from adding light therapy. So that makes the treatment pretty much completely useless since fighting hair loss is a lifetime endeavor. So, if Bryan Johnson wants to spend his money on a laser cap, that's fine, he can afford it. But after 6 months, he should sell it on eBay because it's not going to add anything to his hair loss stack. Why would anyone consider a $1,000+ helmet or hat that offers barely any benefit and then stops working after 6 months a frontline hair loss treatment? Who are these scientists Bryan Johnson has hired who are advising him? They're giving him terrible advice. Could it be possible that these researchers have access to data that I haven't seen yet? Have they conducted their own clinical trials that they haven't published yet? Because literally everything that has ever been published about light therapy shows that it is at best an expensive short-term adjunctive therapy. Even if there are some outliers who are hyper-responders to light therapy, there is not nearly enough evidence to recommend it as a frontline treatment for hair loss. So the fact that a laser cap was his first recommended treatment definitely doesn't bode well for the remainder of this video.
All right, the next thing I do is I apply this topical to my scalp on a daily basis.
Well, finally we get to his hair loss serum, and here are all the ingredients. What an absolute headache. I wish Danny Roddy were here so he can give me an aspirin. Just look at all this crap in this topical. Yes, I know he has finasteride minoxidil in it too, and those products work, but the rest of the stuff is completely useless, and anyone who is a layman on the subject of hair loss who sees this will find this all very confusing. It makes me wonder, what kind of research did Mr. Johnson's Science Patrol do to formulate this insane topical? Seriously, what the hell is all this crap? Diclofenac gel? Ginkgo biloba? What kind of idiot researcher would think this stuff helps stop hair loss? This looks like something you'd find by looking up hair loss advice from fake doctors like Eric Berg, not real doctors and dermatologists. Now, I, of course, have nothing against people experimenting with new things, but when you throw in a bunch of bullshit with stuff that is actually clinically proven to work, it can give people the wrong impression and make them think that the non-clinically proven treatments are equally as effective too. I've made videos on some of these ingredients before in the past, like for example, I've done caffeine, azelaic acid, rosemary oil, and melatonin, and all of the claims that these ingredients stimulate hair growth are based on either just really weak in vitro theoretical research or small studies where the results haven't been reproduced at all. I'll link these videos below if you're interested in more detail. And it's the same story with the ingredients here that I haven't made videos about. For example, I assume he included ginkgo biloba in the ingredients because of studies like this one here. In the study, mice with alopecia areata, not androgenic alopecia, they were given ginkgo biloba, and it was found that it reduced inflammatory signaling pathways in the blood while increasing growth factors like VEGF and HGF in the skin. The problem with this is that it's just a mouse study, and alopecia areata is not androgenic alopecia. Alopecia areata is actually due to inflammation in the scalp, but in androgenic alopecia, inflammation is very low grade and is a downstream effect of increased DHT levels in the hair follicles. So inflammation is a consequence, but not a cause of androgenic alopecia. So it is quite a big stretch to extrapolate this data to humans with androgenic alopecia, considering alopecia areata has a completely different mechanism of action. But I guess if you're throwing in the whole kitchen sink, you might as well include ginkgo biloba as well. So let's pick another ingredient in this disaster of a topical. Diclofenac gel, huh? Diclofenac, it is an NSAID, meaning a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. It is in the same class of drugs as aspirin, ibuprofen, and Vioxx, which is the drug that was taken off the market for cardiovascular side effects, even though it turns out that all NSAIDs, except for aspirin, have a risk of cardiovascular side effects, including the diclofenac in Bryan Johnson's magical hair loss serum. Bryan Johnson's rationale for including it in his hair loss stack, it seems to be based on this report here. It's a report of just 3 men with androgenic alopecia who were using diclofenac gel for a skin condition, and they noted increased hair growth. Here are the images from one case, but unfortunately the before treatment image, which is the image on the left, is of very low quality, and thus it is impossible to assess the thickness of the hair. This looks almost as bad as the before and after picture from Paul Taylor's website. Apparently, the images were provided by the patient, and I don't think it's really possible to say if there really is any change, especially since the images aren't comparable in the angle and cropping. Anyways, based on just this weak case, Bryan Johnson apparently added diclofenac to his hair elixir. However, this is not convincing evidence at all, and Bryan's research team should have done their homework because diclofenac, like other NSAIDs, can actually cause hair loss as a side effect. Even worse than that though, NSAIDs can reduce the efficacy of minoxidil, which is a huge problem for Bryan Johnson since his hair loss stack includes topical minoxidil. I already explained in my Danny Roddy video how aspirin can inhibit the sulfotransferase enzyme, which is the enzyme that converts minoxidil into its active form, minoxidil sulfate. Thus, it can turn a minoxidil responder into a minoxidil non-responder. It turns out this isn't just unique to aspirin. All NSAIDs can cause this, and diclofenac gel is no exception. So not only is Bryan Johnson including an ingredient that by itself can cause hair loss as a side effect, but it can also negate the benefits of minoxidil, which is one of only 2 ingredients in his topical formula, which is actually clinically proven to work. How did your research team fuck this up so badly, Mr. Johnson? Anyways, let's move on to tea tree oil. With tea tree oil, we have this one study here. This is a tiny study of just 32 men who were randomized to receive either 5% topical minoxidil alone or topical minoxidil plus diclofenac and tea tree oil versus a placebo group. The results showed that the topical containing all 3 ingredients resulted in better hair thickness than the minoxidil alone group. However, as you can see from this figure of the effect on hair thickness, the hair thickness was not the same in each group before treatment. So the groups weren't comparable to begin with. This is a big problem with a lot of small studies. All you need is 1 or 2 outliers to skew the results completely. So, based on the study, it is impossible to conclude that tea tree oil and diclofenac really add anything to minoxidil alone, especially since we know that diclofenac is detrimental to minoxidil. Finally, we have biotin, one of the most common ingredients found in any scam hair loss product. But let's go over the research anyways. This article here reviews the data on biotin. The article found that in cases of biotin deficiency, biotin can help hair loss. However, there was no real evidence that biotin can help with hair loss in healthy people who don't have a biotin deficiency. So, unless you have a biotin deficiency, which is extremely rare, then biotin supplementation won't do anything for your hair. So, aside from the 2 proven treatments in this topical, like finasteride and minoxidil, Bryan Johnson's magical mystery hair loss tonic elixir doesn't contain anything extra that has been proven to promote hair growth or stop hair loss. And if anything, the extra ingredients may even be detrimental. Even Bryan Johnson seems to realize that the only ingredients worthwhile in his topical formula are minoxidil and finasteride. Later on in the video, he says,
Also, if you are trying to do something about your hair and everything I'm talking about seems overwhelming, you can start with the basic. This hair formulation, just 5% minoxidil, Rogaine, is a really good place to start. You can get them at any number of places. They sell it. You don't need the longer formulation that I have. You can do the simple one.
I'd add that if you're going to go with just topicals, you need the finasteride too. Or preferably, you can just take oral finasteride and get all the other anti-aging and longevity benefits that I described in my last 3 Bryan Johnson videos that I made, which is what Bryan Johnson should be doing, because there are many, many health and longevity benefits to finasteride beyond just its ability to stop hair loss. However, this is unfortunately the high point of the video, because the next part is...
And the one thing we do to enhance the benefits of the topicals, this and others, is we do microneedling. We've been not consistent with this. So we did it for a while, and then we did so many things in the Blueprint protocol, it kind of got pushed out. So we think it's efficacious. We think it's also a good thing. We were also a little worried because I was doing so many things for my hair. I was doing PRP and microneedling, and we were a bit worried that I was causing too much trauma to my scalp.
Okay, so Bryan Johnson uses microneedling, but even he is worried about something that I've brought up many times in my videos and I've warned many people about. That is the fact that the long-term effects of causing repeated trauma to the scalp with microneedling is completely unknown. So maybe he has been watching my videos because he's worried that he may be causing too much trauma to his scalp, and he's right to be worried. I've done several videos on microneedling. Here's the latest one, but I'll link them all below. I think the best way to summarize microneedling is that it may help enhance the effect of minoxidil, but it is completely ineffective as a standalone treatment. The reason it enhances minoxidil is not because of some bullshit made-up mechanism involving activation of growth factors or inflammation or some other convoluted theory. No. The only reason microneedling helps with minoxidil is because it creates holes in the skin. These holes allow the minoxidil to penetrate more easily and more deeply into the hair follicles. Here's an electron microscopic picture of the holes that are made from microneedling. So Bryan Johnson is absolutely right to be worried about whether something like this could cause too much trauma to the scalp if you're using it for many years. If Bryan Johnson really wants to enhance the effect of minoxidil without putting his scalp and his health at risk, he should just use tretinoin instead. Tretinoin has been shown to upregulate the sulfotransferase enzyme that converts minoxidil into its active form, minoxidil sulfate. Unfortunately, I also must now address the insane and fraudulent idea that microneedling can be used as a standalone therapy, because sadly, there are a lot of people who believe this lie. The most recent randomized study on microneedling as a monotherapy is this one here. It showed no benefit from standalone microneedling whatsoever. In fact, there was even further progression of hair loss with microneedling in the study. No matter what your takeaway is from this research, there was certainly no benefit to microneedling at all. And if you want to see me go over that research in more detail, I'll link my videos on why microneedling is an ineffective treatment as well as a dangerous treatment below. So, Mr. Johnson, as someone who is a fan of yours as well as someone who supports Project Blueprint, I urge you to please stop listening to your current scientists for hire and give up this microneedling gimmick forever. It's not worth the long-term risk to your scalp and to your health.
Then also, there's just some basic stuff like being careful with your hair, not combing too hard, not pulling really hard at the follicles. It's delicate, so just being mindful about that.
Okay, so don't comb your hair too hard. Not sure I'd be paying my scientists tons of money to come up with that bit of advice, but I guess technically it is true since traction alopecia is a real thing. Usually it's caused by something that pulls on the hair for longer periods of time, like tight braiding, but I suppose it could be possible with really aggressive combing too. Anyways, the last part of the video is on his treatment to prevent gray hair.
And so I started going gray. By my mid to late 30s, I was basically all gray.
This is all gray? Well, admittedly, his hair is darker now. Frankly, it looks like he dyes his hair, and he admits he did dye his hair in the past, but he says he isn't dyeing it anymore. I'll take him at his word. He says that he's using 2 treatments that have eliminated his gray hair completely. The first treatment is something called GR7. I had never heard of GR7 until this video, so I followed the link in the description to GR7 website, and here I found out you can buy a bottle of GR7 for a mere 50 pounds. That translates into about $75 US, so this is a pretty steep price. But what exactly is GR7? Well, it's awfully difficult to find out about it from the website. First, I clicked on the button for more information. I got this page here. At the bottom of the page, it tells me the effectiveness is confirmed by something called Eurofins. So I clicked the button to read the full report. So this takes me to yet another page that claims that 90% of GR7 users recover their natural hair color after 4 weeks of treatment. Wow, that's pretty impressive. So I'm really excited to read the scientific test conducted by Eurofins Scientific, which according to this webpage is a world leader in bioanalytical tests. So let's click on the full report button to read the research backing up this wonder drug. Well, here it is. It is pretty short, and the first paragraph is written in Polish, which as a hair loss witcher, I'm ashamed to admit I can't read. However, here's an English translation just below. Alright, it says, quote, I hereby certify that the main active substance of the cosmetic is the amino acid tyrosine. Tyrosine reaches the hair root in a simple process of diffusion. Then there is a stimulation of melanocyte cells which causes melanin pigment production, and in this way GR7 restores the natural color to all gray hair on the head. Unquote. Okay, so is that it? Is this just the amino acid tyrosine? That's the scientific research? Where's the research showing that 90% of users recover their natural hair color in 4 weeks, I wonder? Well, guess what, chooms? It doesn't exist. That's just marketing. The research is completely non-existent. It turns out that tyrosine is added to a lot of hair loss products these days because of its supposed ability to reverse gray hair, but the research to back that up does not exist. Well, maybe it's not completely non-existent because there is this dog study from the year 2018 that looked at whether a diet high in tyrosine caused the hair of black dogs to become darker black. As you can see in the graph of coat color of the dogs, the group given a high tyrosine diet shown in the blue bars had slightly darker coats than the group on a control diet shown in the red bars. There's also this report here that a cancer drug that inhibited the enzyme tyrosine kinase caused repigmentation of gray hair in 9 out of 133 patients treated with it. But tyrosine kinase is an enzyme. It is not an amino acid. And even if it had something to do with the amino acid, 9 out of 133 subjects is not nearly a 90% response rate like the GR7 website claims. But what about the May-Rocky stuff he also uses?
So I'm going to show you the 2 formulations I use. One of them has an herbal extract, which has a color, and that's what you see in my hair. But what's compelling to me again is we biopsied my hair, we looked at it under the microscope, and we see that the color is being produced beneath the scalp.
Well, whatever else May-Rocky supposedly does, it is also a pigment, so it is a natural hair color dye. He specifically says you can see it in his hair. In fact, if you go to the May-Rocky website, in the FAQ section, one of the users asks why there are stains on my fingernail after applying. The website claims it stimulates melanin, but it clearly is just a basic hair color dye. In fact, there's even less evidence that the stuff in May-Rocky stimulates melanin than there is for GR7, because at least GR7 might work for dogs. But Bryan Johnson is claiming he's not just dyeing his hair, he's had his hair biopsied and there is increased melanin below the skin. So what's going on here? If he has increased melanin through this crap, he has to be doing something right? Well, no. What's much more likely here is that Bryan Johnson's hair has become darker as a consequence of using minoxidil. The evidence that minoxidil can darken the hair isn't overwhelming, but I noticed it myself when I started using minoxidil in my 20s. I'm in my 40s now, but I used to have blonde hair. I couldn't find any pictures of me when I was in my 20s, but here's a picture of me from 1998 when I was 17 years old, which was before I started using minoxidil, and as you can see, my hair is visibly lighter than it is today. But beyond just my own anecdote, there are also case reports in the literature too, such as this young girl who was put on minoxidil. You could see as her hair grew out on minoxidil, the hair got progressively darker and she wasn't using any hair dye. I know this isn't overwhelming evidence, but GR7 and May-Rocky are just expensive scams, so I think it is far more likely it's the minoxidil that darkened Bryan Johnson's hair than anything else he's using. So this video is not meant to be a hit piece or some shitty attack video. Like I said, I like the guy, but the reason why I'm making this video is that I don't want Bryan Johnson to go down the same path as other scam artists. It looks like he has become a supplement salesman even. I mean, just take a look at his website. He is selling numerous overpriced supplements now. I think it's only fitting that the olive oil on his website is called snake oil, so I don't know if that's supposed to be a joke or some form of reverse psychology. Maybe the idea is, oh, nobody would think a snake oil salesman would be stupid enough to label his product as snake oil, so people won't actually think it's a snake oil product, so haha. I don't know what the case is, but it is nevertheless disheartening to see someone I've looked up to for so many months resort to these kind of tactics. So there's really not much else to the rest of this video. In the video, he also mentions 2 other treatments, including PRP, meaning platelet-rich plasma therapy, as well as exosome treatments. Apparently, he tried PRP in the past and he is considering exosomes in the future, so neither one of these is part of his current stack. I already did a video on PRP, which I'll link below, but as far as more recent studies on PRP go, the news isn't very encouraging at all. For example, this study published last year used PRP to treat 50 subjects with androgenic alopecia. So what were the results? At 6 months, the majority of the patients, 45%, were unsatisfied and showed no change in hair growth after PRP therapy, unquote. The study then concluded that, quote, PRP has little value as monotherapy. It may be used as an adjuvant with other agents such as minoxidil and finasteride in androgenic alopecia, unquote. As far as exosomes go, they are an old therapy, but there has been a recent review published just this year. So this is a subject I want to go over in an upcoming video, but since he has not really had experience using exosomes yet, I think we can leave it off here since it isn't really relevant to his current hair loss stack. So this video wasn't all bad. Bryan Johnson does give some good advice here.
Now it's important to note that the best time to work on your hair is before you start losing it. A lot of people wait until they start seeing a lot of shedding. Don't wait. Start doing hair care immediately. Now, if you're in your early 20s, mid 20s, good time to start taking note that it's important. Otherwise, it's harder to catch it when you're already down that path.
He says that the best time to work on your hair is before you start losing it. This is excellent advice and something I've echoed many times before, because the sooner you start treatment, the better your results will be, and I talk about that in my Why Finasteride Stops Hair Loss Forever video, which is linked below. But the truth is, you don't need all the extra garbage beyond the finasteride and the minoxidil in his topical solution. You can also definitely do without microneedling and light therapy, both of which have low levels of evidence and concerns over long-term efficacy or even a long-term risk of scalp injury in the case of microneedling. And you can definitely skip all the extra ingredients in his hair serum, which he admits aren't backed by strong evidence. Fighting hair loss doesn't have to be complicated. Just use topical minoxidil and oral finasteride. If you prefer topical finasteride, that's fine. You can use topical finasteride. It will still be effective, but it is systemically absorbed, so if your concern is avoiding side effects, it may not be effective in doing that. So you may be better off just taking a lower dose of oral finasteride, which I talk about in my optimal dose of finasteride video, which is linked in the description. Also, as I've gone over in the whole series of Bryan Johnson videos that I've made, there is more and more evidence that oral finasteride has other life-prolonging health and longevity benefits than just preventing hair loss, and those benefits should be of particular interest to Mr. Johnson. So I hope that if he's watching this, he takes a good look. I can promise him it's at least better advice than what his team has given him so far, and I'm not even asking for money. Bryan Johnson, if you're watching this, please don't take any of this personally. I still have high hopes for you and for your project Blueprint, but when it comes to something like hair loss, which has more scams in it than perhaps any industry that has ever existed, then you need to be extra careful with the data you choose to disclose and your own hair loss journey, especially since you're a highly influential public figure. You do give a lot of good advice, and I do give you credit for that, but a little bad info being amplified by a powerful voice like yours has the potential to do a lot of damage, especially considering all the misinformation that exists about hair loss already. I think you have the potential to be to health what Carl Sagan was to astronomy, so it would be such a setback for us all if you end up just being another bullshitter like Eric Berg. Thank you for watching.